What's going on, guys? Aaron from Top Tier Gaming here, and today I'm coming at you with a regional third place deck profile with Labrynth, and I was able to win my first Arlecchino mat. So here's the mat. I don't know if you can hear me past it, but here it is. I think it's a pretty cool mat. I really enjoy it. It's one of the better regional mats. I think Power of the Elements has been my favorite, but this is the best one since, I think it's better than the Darkwing Blast or the Photon Hypernova one. Super glad to win it, and of course we did it with Labrynth. I'm going to put my rounds up on the screen and go over them really briefly before the deck profile. My only loss was round 1 versus Branded, which I heard it was like Labrynth's worst matchup. I didn't actually have much testing versus it. And honestly, I think Labrynth versus Branded is completely fine. The testing I did get, it was actually pretty solid, but I lost to Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, which I realized my deck had very few outs for, so that was definitely sort of a deck building error on my part, was not preparing for that card a little more. But then I was able to win 6 rounds straight and still make 3rd place. The Branded opponent I played round 1 ended up doing pretty well, so that helped my tiebreakers. And I played a very spread out, diverse tournament. The only deck I played multiple times was Kashtira. And yeah, overall, pretty good tournament experience. It went pretty well. And I think a lot of people kind of knew I was going to a regional this weekend because my upload schedule had been very slow this past week. Definitely lacking in uploads, but the weeks where I'm preparing for regionals, definitely it's harder to upload because I have to spend my free time testing, or I don't have to, but I choose to, so that I can bring you guys videos like this. Again, thank you for everyone who came up and said hi. I always love talking to fans, so again, if you see me at a regional or something, come up, feel free to say hey. And then some shout outs before getting into the deck profile. I do want to shout out my sponsor, Steel Fox Games, for allowing me to go to all these regionals much easier and just, try to perform, so that's always great. So with all that being said, let's hop into this 3rd place regional deck profile. Alright, so getting into my 40 card main deck, my 15 card extra deck, and my 15 card side deck. Of course, this is going to be a little bit more of an in-depth profile because it is a regional top video. And I'm going to be going over my cards, my ratios and choices, why I played what I played, but also talking about how they performed for me at the event, as well as some theory about the deck in general and how it performed overall. So starting off, we're going to start off with one of the boss monsters of the deck, and of course that is our triple Lady Labrynth. Lady Labrynth is one of the biggest boss monsters for the archetype, and the reason we maximize her is because not only can she be somewhat of a starter with the fact that she can set normal traps from your deck, but it's very easy to run a lot of copies of her because she can special summon herself from the hand, so she doesn't stay stuck in your hand like the other boss monster of the deck, Lovely, and it makes it much easier to just max out 3 copies of her. And she's so good for the deck. First of all, her stats are amazing with 3,000 attack and 2,900 defense. Not only can she just summon herself for free, but again, she can get you different traps from your deck, whether they be starters or just extra interruptions, so you do want to maximize 3 Lady. 1, Lovely Labrynth. Now, Lovely Labrynth is actually probably the strongest monster in the deck by far, even better than Lady. The only reason we play less of Lovely is the fact that when she's in your hand, she can't summon herself out, so she is not something you ideally want to draw. You want to get her out through your welcome traps, and then sometimes you can get her out through the field spell or Ariana's effect. But yes, Lovely is one of the things that actually gives the engine an interrupt. When you're playing the Labrynth archetype, not many cards in the Labrynth deck actually are interruptions. Lovely is one of the cards that is, so you do want to play her. She's one of the best cards in the deck. She's also follow-up because she can set traps back from your graveyard, and this is how you reuse very powerful trap cards like Dimensional Barrier, which people are used to. And then also her effect, where your opponent can't respond with monster effects to your normal traps, is exceptional because it can protect you from things like Bell on your big welcome, or even Ash on a different welcome trap. So yeah, Lovely is probably one of the most powerful monsters in the deck, and I wish she could summon herself because I would definitely play more of this, but you can only really play 1. 3, Ariana, the Labrynth Servant. Ariana is a card you oftentimes see at 2 copies in the trap version. However, this is of course the furniture version, where I think 3 of her is a little more warranted, because inside the furniture version, you're really trying to play more with your engine, which is what I really like about the furniture version. When I was going to this event, I hadn't decided what the best version of Labrynth was, right? The trap version is very good, Trap Labrynth, and I thought the furniture version was also very good. And I didn't really think one was better than the other, but I did think the furniture version was more fitting to my playstyle and much more enjoyable because it wants to play with its engine, which is a really solid engine with a lot of follow-up and can do a lot of things. And Ariana is something I wanted to play 3 copies of because she can search any single piece of the engine, you know, being your furniture pieces or your boss monsters and even your spells and traps. So it's something I really wanted to maximize on, and just seeing her means you have more starters. Also, if she stays on board, she's not only a +1 as a Stratos, but she can get you advantage over time. And overall, she's a very powerful piece in the Labrynth deck, and I wanted to maximize her at 3. For the furniture, I am on 3 copies of Stovey, which this is probably the best piece of furniture. And then alongside, we are playing just 2 Chandraglir. I'm playing it like this with 3 and 2, simply because Stovey's arguably the better furniture. They do the same thing for those unaware. You can discard itself and a card from your hand. Or if these are on field, you can also send them from field. To set a Labrynth spell or trap from your deck, which means they're starters, but at the cost of an extra card in your hand, right? So they can be a little weird to play, which is why you don't see them in the trap version, but the furniture version of this deck definitely tries to optimize their usage. They are quick effects, which is also very nice because it means you can use them on your opponent's turn. And then when they're in graveyard and you meet the condition, essentially Labrynth's gimmick, where if you remove a monster on the field due to your normal trap effect, Chandraglir will add itself back to hand and Stovey will special summon. This is sort of why Stovey's a little better. One, getting more bodies on field means you can do quite a bit more with the Labrynth cards, like as far as your extra deck is concerned. And being level 2 is also very relevant for the level 8s in your deck to make something like Chaos Angel. So Stovey's a little better, and I was playing 3 and 3 of them, but I wanted to make space for other cards and play just like better cards in the deck overall than like maximizing Chandraglir. And to finish off the furniture, I'm also just playing 1 Ku-Klok. This is something I was playing more of as well. In fact, I had a list on 3 for a while, and I had a list on 2. I opted for 1 in the end because Ku-Klok is probably the strongest furniture by like when you're playing the deck, because it allows you just every turn to keep activating new trap cards that you set off lady and just have extra interruptions. And that makes Ku-Klok very good. And then with these 5 furniture cards, he just keeps recycling himself forever. So once you see 1 Ku-Klok, you really don't need to see any more, which is another reason I played him at 1. But the biggest reason was by himself, he's like the only card that does nothing. I mean, Lovely as well by herself does nothing. But Ku-Klok, most of your bad hands was because you drew multiple Ku-Klok or Ku-Klok plus another brick like the field spell or Lovely, and I didn't want hands like those, so I just felt like Ku-Klok was making your good hands a lot better and your bad hands a lot worse. So I just opted to play 1 of him, and you know, that does, it kind of stinks when he gets like Bestialed or Crowed or something like that, which is why I thought about siding 1. I decided not to in the end, but I think this ratio, maybe 2 is still fine, but I really wanted to fit other cards. And if you want to play 2, I might bring up options to take out for another one, because Ku-Klok is really good and you don't want to lose access to him. So yeah, I'm still kind of conflicted there. This list is definitely far from perfect, but I was pretty fine with this ratio overall, and I didn't see Ku-Klok dead once. So and in the end, the objective kind of worked out. For Labrynth spells and traps, I am on, of course, the 1 field spell. This card is very similar to Lovely. It's not a card you always want to draw. It doesn't do anything on its own, really. However, like Lovely, it's what gives your archetype an actual interrupt. So Labrynth, and Lovely are really the only 2 cards that are providing actual interruption against the opponent inside the Labrynth engine itself. And also, this field spell actually does so much when you're playing because of the other effect where you can special summon fiends from your hand or grave when you activate a non-Labrynth normal trap. That definitely comes up a lot to bring back Lovely from the grave, or, you know, if any big monster gets removed, you can bring it back with Labrynth. So definitely want to play at least 1 field spell. Then I am on the 3 big welcome Labrynth, which is, in my opinion, just by far the best Labrynth trap. This card is actually bonkers. Like, originally when I was playing this deck earlier on and testing with the trap build a little bit, I was like, well, Big Welcome's really good and Welcome's also really good, but they're probably both equal in power level. After playtesting Furniture Labrynth, I just feel like Big Welcome is much better than the other one. That being said, you still are going to play 3 Welcome Labrynth. Like, even if Big Welcome is better, they're both insane cards that accomplish what the deck needs to have done. And Welcome is actually follow-up in the fact that it can set itself from graveyard, which is super big in like your more grind games. But yeah, I want to maximize on all 6. I did have a list that was on 2 Welcome, and that's actually what the second Ku-Klok was before. But I wanted to take out Ku-Klok for Welcome Labrynth, because in my mind, again, I didn't want to see Ku-Klok in my bad hands, and Welcome, essentially, if I need to get to Ku-Klok, could be Ku-Klok. So that was sort of how I got back to the 3 and 3 ratio. They're like starters, but again, they're trap cards, so sometimes opening them, going second especially, isn't great. But yeah, in the end, I felt like you really do need 3 and 3, and especially with cash in the format when they're banishing like half your deck in some games, you want to maximize copies so that you have them still available to you. And I had one game, I think it was round 5 against cash, and he banished like 15 or 20 cards off my deck, but I was still able to have some welcome Labrynth traps in the deck, and that essentially led me to win. And yeah, so maximizing them definitely worked out. 3 Pot of Extravagance. This is my pot of choice in this list. I think if you're playing Trap Labrynth, Prosperity is always better. And in Furniture Labrynth, I think you really get a choice of which card you would rather play. Of course, Prosperity allows you to pick and choose in your extra deck, which is like fine, even though the extra deck isn't like a big problem to deal with in this deck. But Prosperity also helps you find the best card. Now, my thing is I wanted to run Extravagance because to me it wasn't always about finding the best card in my top 6, but finding 2 like good enough cards that could give my furniture value. Like the big thing in this list and why Extravagance is something a lot of people are on is because it's so good with the furniture, allowing you to just have extra cards to play with because they do discard. And Extravagance was very solid for me all day. Definitely this card was putting in a lot of work. And I would still recommend Extravagance over Prosperity, but you really can just pick and choose which ones you would rather play. Last spell in the deck is the one Called by the Grave. This was a pretty last minute addition, the like couple days before the regional. Essentially I was playtesting and Ash Blossom was just destroying me, and I decided to put Called by the Grave in just in case Ash Blossom, you know, I could stop it with Called by. That didn't come up. In fact, I didn't see this, I think, the entire tournament. Yeah, I don't remember Called by the Graving anything, but I would still play it because Ash Blossom is such a threat. It's a pretty tough card to deal with your welcome trap, so I do like the one Called by the Grave. And now for the only actual trap cards in the deck. We're only on like 3 real traps, which makes this deck pretty far away from like a standard trap deck. We are on 1 Dogmatica Punishment because it's arguably one of the highest impact trap cards. And you're fine playing one of all of these essentially because they're searchable through Lady and recyclable through Lovely. So yeah, Punishment is obviously pretty standard. Terrors was another last minute addition to the deck because I felt like my Cash Tira matchup just wasn't that good. And Terrors is a card that's pretty solid against them, and Terrors was putting in work all day. This card actually came up a lot, and I'm pretty glad I played it, but I still consider it to be like one of the flex spots in the deck. So if you're thinking about playing a card you want to play, maybe take out the Terrors. Like maybe a second Ku Klok could be this card as well. That being said, this card definitely performed for me at the event, and I was glad I played it. And lastly was 1 Eradicator. This card is disgusting. It's a very ban-worthy card. This card is so gross. Like, I didn't want to play it in my original drafts because it's not great going second, but you're also playing so many turn skips that sometimes like these sort of go first cards, they end up working out because you've skipped their turn with something like Droll and Lockbird or D-Shifter in the side deck or just the hand traps you're playing. And then Eradicator did so much for me. Like my cash opponents, there was one game where I discarded 4 spells from my opponent's opening hand and I essentially just won the game for free. This card really does come up to be an FTK, and I think it is kind of mandatory to run. It doesn't do much in a super heavy, like at best it's an MST, but yeah, Eradicator was very good for me all day and I'm glad I ran it. Alright, now on to probably the best part of the deck this weekend. Definitely the hand trap lineup. The hand traps were putting in so much work for me. I'm essentially running 13 hand trap slots, but it's like 12 hand traps. And I was drawing them very consistently, which was very good in my case because these cards put in so much work, and it's part of another reason I wanted to play the furniture build is it leans itself a little better to play hand traps because obviously the trap version of Labrynth wants to play more purple cards. For me, the hand traps were definitely a big draw to the IKEA version, as people call it. So I am running 3 Gamma, and of course that means we're playing our best friend, Driver. Everyone loves Driver. Now, to be fair, Driver in this deck can actually be repurposed fairly easily because of the Labrynth card or the furniture cards like Stovey and Chandraglier. So there were times where, you know, you're just able to discard this for free and it's like, that's fine. Same thing you can do with Gamma if it turns out to not be a live card. You can get rid of it fairly easy and repurpose it. Gamma put in a ton of work. Again, same reasoning with Called by the Grave as well. Ash is a big problem. This card is a great counter to Ash. Now, Gamma does have a couple of cards it conflicts with in the deck, being Ariana, of course, because it's a normal summon that is a monster on board. And starting with her means you can't Gamma things very easily. But another card it conflicts with is actually your Welcome Labrynth because it locks you into special summoning fiends from your deck. So unless you have Driver in hand or Grave, if you've resolved a Welcome Labrynth, you're not able to Gamma until the restriction is gone, so that's something to keep in mind. It doesn't come up often though because they'll just Ash a Labrynth trap that's usually what they do, is they ash the Labrynth trap, so you're able to gamma right there, and it's very solid. But other than that, it's an amazing go second card as well, and if you do resolve it on your own turn because they ash something like Extravagance, you usually just win. So I was definitely happy with the gammas. 3, Droll and Lockbird. This card was disgusting. This card was so broken. I definitely won like 1 or 2 matches because of this card in several games, like maybe 5 or 6 games total were just won because of Droll. It's so good in the current meta, and I even played like a very varied spread of decks. Versus Sprite, this card was disgusting. Versus Cash, I opened Cash and Gamma one game, and my opponent activated Wraiths off, so usually I don't draw when my opponent has an open board, but in the case where I had Gamma, I was like, okay, I'm gonna draw, and if he has Gamma, I'll just Gamma his Gamma. But he didn't have Gamma at all, so I was able to draw him at a very good spot and keep my Gamma. It's a very, like, something you normally don't want to do because it's very high risk, high reward, and if they have Gamma, you usually lose. But in situations like that, like, yeah, this card was great versus Kashtira as well, and this card pretty much won me my super heavy Samurai game. Like, this card, obviously everyone knows it's one of the best cards in the format, and it definitely proved itself for me at this event as one of the best cards in the format. Truly broken. Now here's more of a spicy main deck choice that a lot of people were downing. Like, everyone at the event was saying this card's just not that good this format, and I tend to agree. However, in this deck, I wanted to play it for a reason I'll explain in a bit. I was on 3 Nibiru the Primal Being. So why Nibiru when often people are saying this card's just not that good this format? The reason people say it's not that good is it's not amazing versus Cash if they play around it, obviously, but I felt a lot of people were playing into Nibiru right now, and it turned out to be true. Almost all of my Cash opponents were going for Zone Lock, especially game 1, and Nibiru was very clutch there. It's not good versus Sprite, right, because they can, protect themselves from it with Gigantic. It's not great versus Pearly because they can play under 5 very easily. Super Heavy Samurai can play through this card. They can play around this card. So why play Nib? Well, first of all, Nibiru is a very good hand trap in this deck because of the furniture. So, like, say you have Stovey and Nibiru, and your opponent runs into Nibiru, right? You can activate Nibiru, and then they say it's fine, and then you can chain Stovey, discarding the Nibiru, and you can still tribute the entire board, but you don't summon Nib, and therefore they don't get a token, which is very powerful. But another thing is, in that interaction, if you do that, well then Nibiru's still like resolved. You don't really care about getting the 3k body yourself, and essentially for your furniture it was a free discard because you essentially discarded a card that already resolved and got like value. So Nibiru works amazing with the furniture, and that's one reason I wanted to play it. Also, we're running cards like Gamma that can facilitate Nibiru resolving. But yeah, this card was doing so much work for me at the event where a lot of people said it didn't do much for them. Like, my Sprite opponent had to go into a line where they made Sprint first, which allowed me to nib them game 1, on top of Droll, which was just game. This card came up for me in my Super Heavy Samurai match and was huge. Versus both my Cash opponents, it was great. This card was phenomenal for me, and I'm really glad I played it. It's not a choice you have to make, but I do think it lends itself to work very nice with the furniture cards. Last hand trap in the deck, I had a choice between this card and Ash Blossom, and essentially I just chose Imperm for one big reason, and that's the fact that it is a normal trap card, which means not only is it a very solid hand trap that doesn't play into things like Thrust or Talents, but it also is kind of engine. If you open like Lady and you're able to summon her, and then you have Imperm, well, Imperm plus Lady can kind of be a starter because it can get you to a welcome trap. Imperm can be set from deck with Lady, it can be recycled with Lovely, so it works as like more than a hand trap, and I thought that was very valuable, so I did decide to run the 3 Imperm. And I don't think there's many hand traps you could opt for over this that do as much as Imperm does, simply because it's a normal trap. And that is it for the 40 card main deck. Now on to the 15 card extra deck, which I can go through fairly quickly because honestly I didn't summon many of these, and that being said, even though I didn't summon them, I think this extra deck was still fine, but you could definitely work on it a little more. It wasn't perfect. I'm going to start off with the 2 Chaos Angel. This card in testing came up a couple of times, which is why I wanted to run it. And I wanted to run it at multiples, 1 because of Extravagance and 2 because of Cash. So if you see doubles in this extra deck, it's for Extravagance and Kashtira mostly. It never came up for me at the event, but this card is very good because it's a Fiend, so it works around the lock, and then of course you can use like Stovey and Lady to make this because you can treat one of them as a tuner and their levels add up to 10. So yeah, Chaos Angel is very good. Then I am playing an Excel and a Barone, and this is in case you resolve Gamma on your own turn. You can go into Excel and then make Barone and you pretty much win. And that is it for like the synchros you could actually make. Then onto the links, I am running 2 Muckraker. Now this card I would consider playing 3 of because it was the only thing I ended up making at the event, like naturally. And she comes up the most. There's a lot of lines to go for OTKs with her. To get Lady in attack mode, and that's very good. And she's also some form of like follow-up, and you can turn like 2 furniture pieces to get Lovely back from graveyard or things like that. So Muckraker is very good, and this was a card I wanted more of, and she was gone sometimes due to extravagance or cash. So I would consider playing 3 of this card because he's one of the only things that actually comes up. 1 Nightmare Phoenix, he's just like a generic out to back row, which could come up, and he is a fiend, so he gets around the lock. We're playing 1 Lambda because we're on Cyframe Gear Gamma. 2 Underworld Goddess. This card, again, I didn't play against any Pearly. It was one of the only meta decks I didn't play this weekend. But this card was mostly for the Pearly match, but it's also good to out things like Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, which was my worst nightmare in my branded game. I wasn't able to have a hand that could make Underworld Goddess easily. But you can put so many bodies on board with Stovey and Coup Clock and your welcome traps that it's very easy to get a lot of monsters on field for this card. So she comes up in testing a lot, and I wanted 2 of her because even though she doesn't come up that often, when she does come up, she's very important. So I think playing 2 of this was fine. And then the next 5 cards were just punishment targets. I played 2 Natisse, and this card was very good, and I never needed more than 2, but 3 is also an option if you feel like anything else in the extra deck's not that mandatory. I played the Bucephalus and the Garura. Just in case I had this, I could go for a draw. You know, Bucephalus is just a Garura with 3,500 attack. And then I played 1 Aggregator, which was for Fluanderies, which luckily I didn't play any. But this is probably one of the best punishment targets against that deck specifically. I didn't play Malong or Omega. You could definitely choose to play those. I only had 5 punishment targets. So if you feel like anything else in the extra deck wasn't really relevant or not necessary, you could play more if you wanted to, because punishment is going to go into your extra deck more than you are. So yep, that is it for the extra deck. Lastly, for the side deck, I was pretty comfortable with the side deck in testing, but it's definitely the thing I gave the least amount of thought to while leading up to this event. And I do feel like maybe it could have been better. There was definitely a situation against Branded I didn't think of, being Red Eyes Dark Dragoon. But yeah, with that being said, getting into the side deck, I am playing 3D Shifter. This card is just an additional turn skip. You can play under this card fairly easily. When it's played against you, it's not like it does nothing. Like, it has interactions where it can actually hurt you with your Labrynth traps that won't go to graveyard or things like that. But you side this for matchups where it hurts your opponent infinitely more than you. I sided this once all day against Super Heavy Samurai, and I didn't see it, but luckily I saw Droll instead. But that's mostly what this is for like Super Heavy or any graveyard specific decks. Even Pearly, this card's very good. So yeah, I like the D shifters. 3 Gamma Seal. This card is something I wanted to play, one, because it's a card I was comfortable that, you know, knowing it would do something against every deck, even if it wasn't super high impact, it was going to be a solid enough go second card. But also there's ways to like abuse this card with Big Welcome, because you can bounce it back to your hand and use it again later, which is a funny, nifty like interaction. And again, Pearly, I think, is one of the more nightmarish matchups for this deck, so having a Kaiju is very good as well. You could argue maybe for Xyz Encore, but I do think Kaijus do more across the board, so I just opted for 3 Gamma Seal. Then I played a very large Bestial package. I played the 3 Magnamute, because obviously he's just like the best Bestial monster. And then I played 1 Druis Worm and 1 Baldrake. I played 5 Bestials because like Bestials are very good in this deck. Because of Big Welcome Labrynth, you can recycle these and use them multiple times, which if it's Magnamute will get you even more Bestials. And it's a lot of advantage very quickly against decks this is good against, like Mathmech, Branded, and the Mirror Match. And I wanted to play these for that, but like they could have been Ash Blossoms as well for the Mirror Match, but then my Mathmech match is worse. I don't know, I felt like for Branded these were okay cards, but they weren't amazing because they don't really deal with what like turned out to be this deck's biggest problem against Branded, which was Red Eyes Dark Dragoon. Like, this deck can deal with almost everything else the deck is doing, but Red Eyes Dark Dragoon really was a problem for me. It was my only loss all day was to Dragoon, and these cards didn't really save me from Branded Fusion, dumping Dark Magician, going into Dragoon. So yeah, that was definitely sort of a missight, that's not a word, on my part. And yeah, maybe I'd go back and I'd take one of these out, maybe take the Baldrake out and run like Ice Dragon's Prison for Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, or maybe try to fit Ash. But overall, this package was great, and if I played against like Mathmech or a Mirror, they would put in more work than they did. But all the matchups I did play, I didn't really get to side the Bystials often. So I dedicated 5 cards to my side deck that didn't come up but like one time, which felt pretty bad. But again, I do think these are good cards, so I think next time I play this deck, if I decide to go back to it, I may just play 4. But yeah, Bystials are very good in this deck, which was sort of the point I wanted to bring up, because them plus Big Welcome is very nice. Then I played some going first cards. Obviously, trap decks want to have going first cards, and while this doesn't function completely as a trap deck, Lightning Storm and Evenly definitely are cards that can still destroy you. So yeah, you do want cards that out it like a pointer. I choose to play this over cards like Judgment because first of all, it's searchable, which is huge, and hand knowledge is very, very good for this deck. But being a normal trap makes it very good. 1 Deck Devastation Virus. This card was the best card in my side deck for a funny story I want to tell. Against Super Heavy Samurai, this card, I believe, discarded 11 monsters from my opponent's hand because of the level 12 Super Heavy Samurai Synchro. I remember I activated this. I actually sided this card in going second because I was like, well, if I draw Droll or Shifter, I'm going to, skip this turn. And if I can set up Deck Devi, it's probably game. And that's essentially what happened, is I was able to set up Deck Devastation even though I was going second. I used it, discarded 4 cards from his hand. He was still able to make the level 12 Super Heavy Samurai Synchro that says when a spell, trap, or effect is activated, they can draw until they have 3 cards in hand. So I Deck Devied him for 4, and then later in the turn he drew 3 cards, and Deck Devi allows you to see those as well, and they all 3 got discarded. Then he drew for turn the next turn, and it got discarded, which I think would be like 8 cards. And then he ended up drawing 3 again off the Super Heavy Samurai guy and discarded all 3 of those as well. So I think this discarded 11 monsters from my opponent's hand, which is just insane. This card's an FTK versus Super Heavy if you go first, however. It's also very good versus Sprite. It's good versus like Fluandereeze. It hits almost every hand trap in the meta except like the Bystials. So Deck Devi, I think, is truly insane right now, and I'm playing it over Full Force because of Super Heavy. I think this card's better, but some people prefer Full Force Virus. I really like Deck Devi. The card was very good for me, so yeah, I'm glad I played it. And then 1 D-Barrier, which was also an insane card for me. It just works so well in the Labrynth engine. Being able to be searched and reused against decks like Sword Soul or Branded is very good. And then again, it's also pretty good versus Super Heavy Samurai calling Pendulum. I don't have much testing with that, but it's pretty solid there. And then versus Pearly, you call Xyz, and that might just be game, so... there's even an option to play multiple D-Barrier, but I was just on 1 and it worked out for me. The last card in the deck was 1 Secret Barrel. So this card, I'm glad to report, never did anything and never came up for me at all. I think I sided it 1 time and I didn't see it, and I prefer it that way. I wish I didn't have to side this card. But if anything, this should be Altar for Tribute. That's what most people are playing in Labrynth because it's a little better. I do not have that card, however. I played Secret Barrel, so this is like a different option you can play, but I think Altar for Tribute's better. Now, this card doesn't, like, you can activate this card even if you control no monsters, so that's pretty good. But even still, I think Altar for Tribute's the better card. But I chose to play a Secret Barrel. It did nothing, and I'm glad about that. And yeah, that's going to do it for this deck profile. I hope you guys enjoyed. Definitely a longer one. I like to explain the regional deck profiles a little more in depth for people who want to listen to the explanation and why I played what I played. Of course, you can also just skip through these deck profiles to get the list. I'm sure that's what most people do anyways. But yeah, I hope you guys did enjoy. Feel free to leave your thoughts down below. Anything you thought about the decks, things I could play going forward. How are you playing Labrynth? I'll be sure to read those. And yeah, this has been Aaron from Top Tier Gaming. Bye, YouTube.